to the Post-Treasurer Overview Training. My name is Allison Ingram. I'm the Director of Finance, Administration, and Operations for the SAME National Office. I'm close to my 2-year anniversary with SAME, but I've worked in the nonprofit finance and administration field for the last 20 years. I'm thankful for this opportunity to spend some time discussing your rules and tasks with you, likely because I'm a CPA and I'm completely biased, but in my assessment, you have the most critical role on a post board. You will notice the title of this webinar is Overview Training. I'm going to try to be fairly succinct as we could get really deep on many of these topics. Therefore, at the end of today's webinar, I'll provide you my contact information for any additional support you may need. Please do not hesitate to contact any of us on the resource page on any post-related matters. We may not have all the answers, but we will promise to try to get you answers or point you in the correct direction. We end up fielding a lot of calls every day with various questions about post-related matters. And I would just say to you that your best resource on treasurer matters is in the Post Operations Manual, in particular Chapter 3. If you haven't read it, I suggest that you do so. It does an excellent job summarizing your role, communicating our expectations and timelines, and providing samples of best practices. That manual can be found in the Post Operations Resource Center. In case you aren't sure how to access it, please reference the screenshot in this slide. The Post Resource Center is filled with many financial resources as well as non-financial resources. Please note that there are tabs on the right-hand side that didn't make the screenshot that help with navigation. As an example, I'm often asked for a copy of our Tax Exempt Determination letter. That letter can be found in the Resource Center, as well as some other documents that we'll be discussing later in this webinar. Every board member of any nonprofit has 3 main duties that they are responsible for. Those 3 duties are the duty of loyalty, the duty of care, and the duty of obedience. A treasurer's fundamental duty is the duty of care, which means to be informed, ask questions, be competent, exercise care, and be a good steward for the post and the post funds. So enough of the theoretical. What does the duty of care actually mean? The basic duties of a treasurer include, but are not limited to, the following: financial management and oversight. That includes tasks such as reconciling bank statements, selecting a bank, reviewing, managing, and maintaining internal control policies and procedures. Of all your duties, financial management and oversight is likely the most important of those responsibilities. Preparing a budget. Every post should have an annual budget. The treasurer should drive this process and have the budgets completed by the beginning of the fiscal year, which for SAME is January 1st. Reporting. The post treasurer is responsible for generating financial reports and completing regulatory requirements, which for most posts, regulatory requirements is limited to tax returns. And then serve as a financial liaison, which basically means making sure you're keeping your board informed of the financial status of the post. You should make it a practice to explain budget to actual variances, answer any questions or concerns about the post's financial position. So I just want to spend just a minute on our organizational structure, because it's important to understand this as you manage the finances of the post. SAME was incorporated in 1920, and part of that incorporation was the creation of our bylaws. Those bylaws allow for the creation of the posts. All posts are subsidiaries to the national organizations. However, you must have your own bylaws, which are created by a template that we provide you here in the national office. As a treasurer, if you haven't seen your bylaws, make sure that you see them, because many of your roles and responsibilities are delineated in the post bylaws. One thing I get asked a lot is whether or not posts need to be separately incorporated, and the answer to that is no, but you must have your own tax ID. I'll go into more detail in the rest of this presentation about the national and post tax relationship. In 1954, the IRS issued us a determination letter granting us national tax exemption under the code 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. Annually, we submit a group exemption filing to the IRS. In that filing, we provide a listing of all our good standing subordinate organizations. You'll notice that good standing is said with emphasis. With that listing, we provide tax ID numbers, mailing addresses, and treasurer names. This group exemption filing, along with your timely submission of tax filings, is how you get to keep your tax exempt status. Our group exemption number is 1278, though it's unlikely you would ever need to reference that number. You'll notice above I said that it was important that we file mailing address and treasurer's name in our group exemption filing. As a result of that, it's critical that you make sure the national office has your updated information because it could create some conflicts if what we have is different from the tax return that you're filing. Now for a quick cautionary tale, you want to avoid having your tax status revoked. Your status can be revoked if you aren't on the group exemption filing or you don't file your tax returns according to IRS deadlines. If you are revoked, unfortunately, there's nothing I can do to help. The IRS requires you initiate the whole tax exempt determination process from the beginning. We just went through that process in the national office when we created the new foundation, and I promise you, you do not want to get familiar with IRS Form 1023. So in the previous slide, I talked a lot about good standing, and in order to be included in our group exemption filing, you have to be in good standing with the national office. And there are three things you have to do to be in good standing, and that's file your annual report on time, submit your tax return to the IRS on time, and conduct an annual audit on time. So let's talk a little bit more about the annual report. For some of you, the annual report may seem like a nuisance. And maybe I should say, for most of you, the annual report may seem like a nuisance. However, we are required by the IRS to monitor our subordinate organizations and to ensure they have internal controls, they complete annual audits, and have a good understanding of the tax-exempt purpose. We have really attempted to streamline the annual report and make it easier for you as a treasurer. Our main objective with this report is to ensure that you have a good understanding of your financial position. If you are able to fill out the annual report, that gives us confidence you know your revenue, your expenses, and where your assets are maintained. We'll talk more in detail about the certifications that we require later, but we do require that you certify you'll have an annual audit and file your tax return. If you have questions when completing your annual report, please feel free to reach out to us, but my quick advice would be to not overthink it. We could probably spend an hour on this topic of tax returns alone. I'm sure none of you want to do that, and I don't really want to do that either, but there is some important information I want to relay to you. Take a look at the above parameters to determine which return you're required to follow. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can help you determine the appropriate return. The only thing I'll point out about the parameters is note that with the difference between the 990 EZ and the 990 long form, make sure that you take note of the and the or. So you basically are eliminated from the 990 EZ, even if you have gross receipts below the limit, but if your assets are higher than the limit, then you have to do the 990 long form. If you review the above list and you meet the criteria for either a 990 EZ, a 990 long form, or 990T, the national office strongly recommends you use a tax preparer. 990s are complicated and change with some regularity. There are also governance questions and other questions that a tax preparer is better equipped to answer. As I mentioned in the beginning, I've worked in this field for a long time, and I've taken plenty of training on 990s, and I still have a tax preparer prepare our national office 990. It's really easy to make a mistake, and I would rather just share that responsibility with somebody who's an expert in it. The majority of posts will actually file a 990N, the easiest of the returns. This return is also known as an e-postcard. The 990N only requires you to make certifications. You don't have to provide any financial information. You are limited to filing this return only electronically. If you go to the IRS website and type in 99 filing, it will provide you a link. If you haven't ever used the system, you'll be required to create a new user profile. Typically, you aren't considered out of compliance with the IRS if you don't annually file a 990N. However, as a best practice, National Office requires you to complete an annual return. Once you're finished with any of the above returns, send us a copy of your filing and send that to Stacy Humes, whose email information will be included later in this webinar. So what is the due date for filing a tax return? The due date for all returns is May 15th. If you think you're going to miss a deadline and you're a 990 EZ or a 990 long form filer, make sure you file an extension. The one caveat I'll say to that is that the IRS generally only allows one extension for tax ID. They don't often grant you the second extension. So if you ask for an extension, make sure that you file by the due date because penalties and interest accrue quite rapidly. If you're a 990N filer, there isn't necessarily a penalty for filing late, but what you should do is the minute you realize you're late, you should file it immediately. Don't forget, if you have more than one tax ID, you must file more than one tax return. Also be cautious, make sure you file with your post-tax ID, not your national tax ID. If you want to check your entity's tax status, go to the IRS website and type in EO Select Check. It will take you to a tool that you can verify your status, when you last filed a return, and other post information. You can also use the address listed in this slide. All state tax issues must be handled directly by the post. Every state has different requirements, and therefore all state-level issues must be handled directly by the post. If you want state sales tax exemption, you must file for that. That is not something granted by the National Office Tax Exempt status. Our next subject is annual audit. Each post is required to conduct an annual audit. The purpose of this audit is to get an independent opinion on the fairness of financial statements and the effectiveness of post internal controls. The Post Operations Manual gives you excellent guidance on the composition of the audit committee and the roles and responsibilities of that committee. A treasurer or someone with signatory authority must not be on the audit committee. A post may choose if you prefer to have an internal audit, which is one completed by your volunteers, or an external audit, which means you pay a company to perform. External audits can be quite expensive, but they do provide you a level of assurance that having volunteers provide, you can't quite meet that same level. In the last year, we have developed an audit work plan or checklist that you can use to conduct your audit. You're not required to use this tool, however, it was designed to help posts who aren't quite sure how to proceed. One other topic, which I actually don't have a slide for, but I want to talk about really quickly is PCI Compliance. PCI Compliance relates to credit card security. Many of you process credit card payments, and I just want to advise you that you are required by law to not keep credit card information unsecured. So if you're at a post-level event and you write down someone's credit card information, you need to shred that material, black it out, or keep it under lock and file. Otherwise, you'll be out of compliance with the PCI regulation. There are a lot of good tools available now for processing credit cards on demand, such as Square. So if you need any assistance looking into any of those options, please feel free to reach out to us. So your main post-operations support team includes both post-operations team, who you would contact either Stacy or Jill, or the finance team, where you would contact either Will or myself. Any of us are available to help you. You're welcome to reach out to one of us, and if we aren't the right person, we'll make sure we loop in the correct person. Today's presentation was very high level. I encourage you, again, to go back and read your post-operations manual, Chapter 3, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to help.